All right. I think it's okay if people keep tuning in, but we might as well get started. So I am Jesse Piers. I am cycling manager for Reconnect Rochester. And thanks for tuning in for our third and final workshop of 2021. In April, we've been in the rhythm now of doing a bike infrastructure update every April or so before the weather heats up and bike month begins. And at that April workshop, we typically hear about what bike infrastructure is headed our way. And that is on YouTube from the spring of 2021. We learned about the bike boulevards and the all sorts of advocacy opportunities that would be headed our way this year. In June, we had a documentary screening of 3 short films featuring women cyclists. And we did that in collaboration with Exercise Express and the Rochester Women's Bike Fest. I will take a quick note to say that if you go to the bottom of your screen and go to subtitles, transcription is turned on. So feel free to use that feature. I did want to give a shout out to Our Community Bikes and the Rochester Bicycling Club for sponsoring this workshop series this year. We couldn't have done it without their support. A quick note also that this Saturday I will be teaching a free Winter Cycling 101 class. Saturday, 1 p.m. for the Central Library. It was supposed to be in person at the Central Library, but with everything happening, it'll be strictly over Zoom. There's still time to register if you just email cycling@reconnectrochester.org. I can send you the Zoom link for that. But if you're not familiar with Reconnect Rochester, we're a nonprofit that champions transportation choices so that Monroe County can be a more vibrant and equitable place. We advocate for a well-connected community that makes it easy for everyone, regardless of physical or economic ability, to get around easily and safely. And we were super thrilled when HOPR brought bike share back to Rochester after a year's absence, this time with e-bikes and e-scooters added to the menu. And we're so excited about this bike share because it gives people another mobility option to connect them to jobs, to education, to healthcare, shopping, and all the other places that they need to go. And this is especially important here for the 26% of city residents who don't have access to a personal vehicle and therefore rely on the bus or other means to get around. From the beginning, Reconnect Rochester has advocated for this bike and scooter share system to be accessible to all. That means stations located throughout the city, not just in downtown or in wealthy or trendy areas. The service must extend to underserved populations for whom low-cost bike transportation is not just a novelty, it's not just something cool, but it's an economic opportunity. So much thanks to the ESL Charitable Foundation for a big, well-placed investment in stations serving lower income neighborhoods. And so this workshop tonight is something that we had been in the custom of doing with Zagster and Pace, our previous bike share operator, just an end of the season report out to the community on data, trends, a look at what we can look forward to next year. So I'm going to hand it off to Isaac Hutton, who is HOPR's operations manager in Rochester. It's been an absolute pleasure working with Isaac. After he's gone through his presentation, feel free to use the raise your hand feature and we can unmute you to ask a question, or you can just throw your question at the bottom in the Q&A. But I'm going to hand it over to Isaac. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for that great introduction. And it's great to be here with Reconnect Rochester and you all. And, so it's good to hang out with some of the bike nerds, around Rochester. This is great. It doesn't happen too often. So beside me, this is Jasmine, who's our city planner. So whenever you see a station out on the street, she's the boots on the ground, make sure the sidewalk is up to snuff and can support a station. So this is Jasmine, works with our permits and all of this. And so, yeah, we have a ton of data from the last year. It's almost too much to sift through, but I did come up with a little presentation and just kind of hope to tell a story about what this year looked like for us. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So let's see, we can all see that? Good. So yeah, here we are. This picture is of me, and this is my daughter Autumn. Starting in April of this year, it was kind of like, you know, the North Pole in Santa's shop, unboxing all of these brand new scooters and getting them stickered, and the GPS is working. And so she was my helper for quite a while. So anyway, so moving on to see. Oh man, I'm trying to get the next slide. Isn't this funny? You test it out, and then as soon as it goes live, it doesn't work. Ah, there we go. Okay, so right, so RTS started a initial feasibility study to say, you know, what would bike share look like in the greater Rochester area? So they looked at the demographics of the city, the different neighborhoods, where stations would be used, even down to how many bikes we ought to deploy. And so it was part of RTS's, you know, Reimagine RTS, part of their transportation on demand. And so HOPR was, you know, really happy to partner with RTS. And so RTS wanted what you see pictured there over the Ford Street Bridge, which is near our warehouse here. To the right, you see our pedal bike. And on the back of that, it's a solar powered lock, actually. So all of our units use GPS, and we can actually lock and unlock them remotely. So obviously it's just a regular pedal bike, but the lock itself still needs a little bit of juice. In the middle is our kick scooter, and I hope you've all have had a chance to use all of these. So I'm just kind of introducing who's on the team here. Segway kick scooters. And to the left here is our e-bike, our pedal assist e-bike. So that's what we launched with. And right away, we wanted to get involved with community partners. And so we reached out to different cycling groups. To the top right was a ride we sponsored from the Black Girls Do Bike with Keisha. I don't know if you're there, Keisha. Anyway, Black Girls Do Bike. And we always, you know, in partnership, we'll sponsor rides, we'll provide bicycles, you know, create promo codes if somebody wants to continue to use the bike, which we did for Black Girls Do Bike. At the bottom of the screen, we've worked really closely with the Rock Freedom Riders. And so we've sponsored a number of their rides. That one, I believe, was Juneteenth at the Museum of Play. And the left-hand corner, that's a field tech. You know, again, it's there's a lot of hands here. We keep on full-time mechanic Ben. I don't know if that's the Ben that's in the room here. We keep on a mechanic, field techs that go around and service all of these units. And this was Paolo, a field tech we had, and that's the excitement of laying out the first station. And we started with virtual hubs, actually. I don't know how familiar you all are with hubs in different parts of the country, different cities. But if you go, say, visit a place like Cleveland, Ohio, they have a number of different scooter companies, and they all use the same hubs, and they're virtual. They're essentially just street corners. So we played around with that in Rochester this year, using just stickers on the street to show where our bikes would be, see how the public would respond. They were very favorable towards it. And then midway through the year, we were partnering with a local steel manufacturer, Steelworks, and we created the stations that you see there. That one on your right is at Liberty Pool Way. So they turned out really, really nicely. One thing we like about them is it's a really heavy steel that actually it floats on the pavement. So we don't have to drill into the sidewalk or anything like that, like other, you know, bike racks need. And so it's essentially just there so people know where the station is. And we can also provide helpful information like on the placards, safety information, as well as sponsorship information, should that come up, which it has this year, which is cool. So here's just the kind of the data drop. So I'll run through this, and I know questions are just going to pop up after that. So we had 65 stations that we started out with. And that was always a moving number. So we had permits ready to go with our partners in the city of Rochester. Some of the other suburbs were a little bit, just it took time for them to join the game. In the end, we got into Fairport, Pittsford, all the way out to Brockport, Brighton, if I didn't say Irondequoit, city of Rochester, and we'll get into phase 2 pretty soon here. So 65 stations. We started out distributing helmets onto every unit just in the name of safety, which not every bike share does. We wanted to see what the response was like for that. People always ask us, are people stealing your bikes? What's going on with that? And the answer is we've got really pretty good GPS on all of our units. We can track our units essentially down to like the corner of what building it's actually in, which is pretty great. And so as far as bicycles being stolen and chopped up for scrap metal, to our knowledge, that really didn't happen here in Rochester, which is really, really great. We did still have some slight issues with folks wanting just to hold on to it so that they could be the only ones to use it, which is kind of counter to the micromobility idea. But other than that, we know exactly where our units are. We offer reduced fare passes. So, if somebody, if it was difficult for them to have that transportation option, we had a option for reduced rates that they could sign up for if they really needed it to get to work or school or what have you. Different membership packages. I hope you've all played around on our app, used the service. If you haven't, it's HOPR Transit, HOPR. Our top stations were Liberty Pole Way, Martin Luther King, Brugger's Bagels at Goodman, Mount Hope and Celebration, which was right down near the University of Rochester, as well as the University of Rochester Medical Campus. So a lot of positivity there, and the Little Theater. So 31,000 trips total, averaging about 200 per day. And once we deployed all of our stations, all of our bikes, really at the peak over the summer months, that number was really like 400 a day. So I think, when you have averages of like what was early May like, what was, late October like, that's kind of what, brought down those averages. But it was really a boisterous summer, all told. So 23,000 total number of users, riders, 58,000 miles. And we did some computing here, over 51,000 pounds of carbon offsets through using these bikes and scooters, which is pretty great. We found that, the weekend days tend to be the busiest. Hours of say 6 to 10 p.m. tend to be the busiest, but we can see it hour by hour. And there's definitely that uptick, as the business world starts, 8, 9, 10 a.m. also had a lot of activity. And let's see, by and large, people really loved our scooters, the electric scooters. So Rochester had bike share before, but people were like, what is this electric scooter that I don't even have to pedal, don't have to work at it, it just goes. So people really, really appreciated our scooters. To do the electric bike. And I just realized a couple numbers, it should be 60% of users rides were the scooters, and then bicycles 25%, and e-bike was more like 15% down there. So that's that. Here is kind of a map of our phase 1 area. City of Rochester, like I said, also all the way out to Brockport. And then throughout this year, we're just working on kind of creating that patchwork, because we know that ideally somebody can walk a quarter mile from their house or less, pick up a hopper bike, micro-mobility bike, and then ideally there's a station, say a quarter mile away from where they work. So, we're aware of that, always working on that. Number of units that we actually put out, we put out 250 or so pedal bikes, 175 kick scooters, and 75 e-bikes. The e-bikes were a little bit later into the game because the powers that be wanted to wait until we had steel stations actually put out so that we could put the e-bikes there. So that is one reason why the ridership data seems a little bit low for e-bikes. It's because we just didn't have as many out this year, and they came in mid game. But people really like the pedal assist. So, here's kind of a general idea of our station distribution. Christine, I saw you say hi there. You know, we're working down more stations in Brighton. We're continually permitting in other suburbs. We do have I'll say a conversation on the books next week for Henrietta. We're going to talk with those folks. The most recent approval contract we've had is Irondequoit. And so growing that. And then it was interesting, you know, so this year in review, it was kind of a lot of natural growth, which is cool. So if you look at some of the early news clips and things like that, it was like, well, why don't you have a station on Park Avenue? And if you know Park Avenue, it's a very narrow road, and the sidewalks are very narrow and things like this. You know, East and Alexander, we're kind of the nightlife crowd and that kind of thing. Why aren't you there? So we did that. That was kind of a mid-year thing, mid-year accomplishment. And then some other questions like, well, hey, why aren't you in these poor neighborhoods? And kind of mid-season, the ESL Bank approached us, or we met each other, and ESL sponsored a number of stations in what they call equity locations. So really those neighborhoods that need them the most. And that was also in partnership with the Rock Freedom Riders. And so it was really cool to kind of see that a sponsor come from our community in partnership with a bike group from our community. And then I just included the little photo to the left, just to show again how the map kind of changes, and we're always looking to do it a little bit better. Sometimes we'll be driving by and it's like, there's 6 scooters parked right beside a bus stop. That's not our station, but 6 people have left scooters there. Maybe we should have a station there. And so that's what we did. We created a station there. I think that's North Hudson or something. So we're always analyzing the data, saying, you know, if a station is not getting any ridership, we think about removing it from the map. If we're seeing a whole ton of rides in a certain area, we look to see how we can be in that area or better serve it. This is a general heat map. That the red dot in the middle is Liberty Pole. So we would stock that with plenty of scooters as well. And then you can see that the dots tend to be stations in the areas. And the area down below here, this is the University of Rochester, Mount Hope and Celebration. Again, lots there. And again, it's one of those things we know that the more stations we have, the more heat we'll see and the more interconnected it will be. So, yeah. So our initial contract is for 3 years, and for what we're calling phase 2 or next season, this what you see here: Irondequoit, Pittsford, Henrietta, Canandaigua, Geneva, Geneseo, and this is again feasibility. We'd like to see things here. Jasmine and I were on a call today with the city of Canandaigua. They were very amenable to the idea, so fingers crossed for sure in Canandaigua. Just recently, RIT reached out to us. They have some funding available that they would like to sponsor some stations. And so since we've been here, the response has been really only positive, which is great. People are like, well, this is really cool. How can I get it outside my business, at my college, stuff like that. And phase 2, with the growing number of stations, will obviously also be putting out that many more bikes. And so I'm going to have at least 150 more bicycles to add to the mix. And we're still kind of hashing out what that exact ratio will be in terms of, is it pedal bikes, e-bikes, scooters, that kind of thing. And so that, in a nutshell, was our year in review. I wish I had all the field techs here, because we could just tell you stories about all the wonderful people we met and things we ran into this year. But that's kind of the raw data in 15, 20 minutes or less. So Yeah. What questions do we have?
So we have a few starter questions just to get the conversation started, Isaac, and then I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and of course people can raise their hands at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
But for starters, can you discuss the idea of off-station fees? And sometimes bike share operators choose to have that. So it's kind of a three-part question. What are the advantages to off-station fees? Did we have those? And is that something that could change in the future?
Sure. Great question. Yes. Thank you for that. So the short answer is yes. Out of hub fees are pretty standard in the micromobility industry, and Hopper did not start with that in Rochester this year, and the reason was because we started with the virtual stations. It was one of these things where our steel distributor, our rack maker, there were a lot of things that were delayed, and we knew we weren't going to see any racks till around about July or later. And so we started with these virtual hubs, which was a new idea, and we wanted to decide, with the rider. We didn't want a rider to be in a position of not knowing where the hub was and then charge this fee. That was the rationale. And this came down from our CEO, Josh, because it's in the company's best interest to charge these fees because they make more money, right? But in order to side with the rider, the decision was made not to introduce those. I can tell you 100% that they will be introduced right away at the start of next season, which again is just standard across the industry, and it helps everybody out because if people are ending their rides in random places, then the next person can't find that unit, and the hub is maybe empty, and all these kinds of things. So an out of hub fee, it essentially just provides an incentive for the person to bring it back to a station so that somebody else can use it. It's just kind of more of a neighborly gesture. I used one somewhere, and it was like, if you don't return the bike within 24 hours, they would actually charge you the price of the bike, like $800,000. Like that's a way to get bikes back, for sure. Did I answer that fully?
Yeah, that was great. So
Cool.
you mentioned the reduce rate. What's the process for somebody to apply, and what kind of information do they have to give, and what is that process like?
Sure. Yeah. So in our app, when you're looking through passes, there should be an option, and there was just a new app rolled out like literally 48 hours ago, a new app. So if you look there, you should be able to indicate reduced fare, and then essentially there's just ways that they have of verifying that. So just want to verify, do you have an EBT card or something like this to qualify? Mm-hmm.
All right. So you mentioned the idea of people hanging on to assets, and what was that trouble like? And if someone is using the app itself and they go to where an asset should be and it's not there, what should they do, and what can Hopper do in that instance?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was, again, it's just I'm hoping this was a first season kind of issue, because again, in the idea of when people understand the idea of micromobility, that it is for everybody, that the issue doesn't happen, right? So again, the positive note is that we still have them. It's just that people are hanging on to them. So what that looked like, especially the kick scooters. The kick scooters required battery swaps from our field technicians, and so what people would do is they could, again, say, keep their scooter in their garage, and ride it, and then come to find out, oh no, now my scooter's dead. What can I do? So we were actually literally getting phone calls from customers, hey, can you come and swap my battery for me so that I can use it again? And of course, we're adamant with them, like, this is not how it works, and so it was a little bit of that. Plus, I do think that the out of hub fee will directly contribute to that. So, if people, are getting charged just a small amount, it's going to be enough of an incentive for them to take it back to the station, so they don't keep getting those dings on their debit card. Yeah.
Excellent. So if I had this right, you said 250 pedal bikes, 175 scooters, and 75 e-bikes. Was that just for the city or for the entire region?
That was for the entire system.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that
And
was what
did
we were
that?
working.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just to say that was I'll say that was the fleet we were working with, so if somebody says, hey, I didn't see, 100 scooters out there today. It's because, obviously there's a certain amount of maintenance, certain things that are going on, but that was the fleet we were working with over this last season.
Yeah, that's a follow-up question. Was there ever a fluctuation of available assets over the course of the season?
There was a little bit. So we actually got kind of I'll call it a refreshment of scooters mid-season, because again, it surprised the company how much people like the scooters. So I think we started out with less than 100, and there was a scooter share in Louisville, Kentucky, actually, that HOPR ran, and that one, they were kind of nearing the end of their season, or the scooters, and so they actually decided to send all of those scooters up to us just because the reception was so good. So we boosted our numbers mid-season, and one thing that did happen with our scooters this year was we found out that we started with brand new scooters, that the back fender was kind of it wasn't the best plastic, and it held the tail light, however. And so if a scooter would come back with a broken or cracked fender, we unfortunately couldn't redeploy it because we wanted it to have the tail light. So by the end of the season, most all of our scooters had that issue, and so we're kind of wading into the waters of working with Segway to get replacements, and obviously we kind of had delays in shipping. We experienced, just like the rest of the bike world, delays in shipping from overseas parts and things like that. And so a lot of our things, especially the bicycles, have pretty standard parts, so those we could redeploy almost same day. But the scooters were ones that we were waiting on some replacement parts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of next year, are you expecting, is it an April 1st rollout, and is pricing expected to be the same?
April 1st rollout. Yeah. So we're making plans for that. So we might even be installing stations ahead of that in order to have units right there. For pricing, I'm going to have to, defer on that question, just because, the ultimate answer is not up to me. It's kind of a company-wide thing. And, as come March 1st, the idea might be different, but we're committed to making it equitable and reasonable and consistent. Obviously we understand if it costs a lot more than it did last year, people aren't going to want to write it. So, but you can, bet on it being pretty consistent.
The final question that I have ready before we go to the Q&A and the chat, is there any type of customer survey over the off season, so you can hear from customers and just their general thoughts?
Sure. Well, I mean, customers can always call into our customer service line, like the 800 number that they see on our bikes and scooters. We're always taking feedback there. We haven't officially, reached out to the general public, and again, through our app, folks can submit ideas or issues or that. But if we'd like to do something like that together, Jesse, kind of lean into your email list, we'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
So we do have one question. Is there anything you can tell us about the demographics of users? I don't know if this is possible, but a percentage perhaps between, recreational usage and, people getting to work or educational opportunities. Can you even tell that?
Sure. Again, it would be mostly by mileage. We do have some additional data. We can look at every trip and exactly, what route it was. So obviously, some of it we can guess, Friday evening and somebody was on the inner loop for 3 hours. You could guess they're not going to work. That in terms of demographics, other demographics, of course, people do put in, we can figure out their age, gender, and so forth. But for purposes like this, we don't use that data. I could see how it might be, beneficial for the company in the long run. Like, say, hey, how can we, say, get more female riders to use our system, that kind of thing. So I can look at each individual user for Rochester, but it's not collated in that way.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
we have a question about any usage patterns for Fairport and Pittsford. Were they canal riders, or did people, use it outside the canal?
Yeah, so Fairport and Pittsford, it was a little bit on the quieter side, I'll be honest, because Fairport and Pittsford, they were just the bicycles, and so I mentioned Irondequoit was our most recent contract, and previous to that, the most recent was Pittsford. So, Pittsford came in, I want to say maybe late August, maybe September. We finally got out into Pittsford, and so again, our hub in Fairport is right, like you said, right on the canal. So I think people use it for short trips, and again, a place like that, again, not to make generalities across the board, but the station on the canal in Fairport, the people who live nearby have a different lifestyle than, say, the inner city folk who may actually be using it to get to work or something like that. Not to make generalities, but it tends to be more recreational in, say, a place like Pittsford, Fairport.
Can you clarify whether someone is allowed to, take a bike from the city of Rochester or a scooter and go all the way to Pittsford, and then in the evening use it back? Or are they allowed to cross boundaries freely like that?
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. As long as it's within our service area. One thing that does happen, or it happens rarely, and you wonder what were people thinking. If somebody goes outside of our service area, the unit will, if it's an e-bike or a scooter, the unit will shut down. The scooter will actually power down, and they'll get charged. I think it's like $25 for doing that. And then our field techs take a trip out to Spencerport to pick it up.
Got it. We have a question. How many of the phase 2 bikes are going to be in the city of Rochester? Are most of these bikes going to the phase 2 areas?
Yeah. So, Rochester, in inner city of Rochester, we had a lot of stations there, and the people, Julie, I see you there. Hi, Julie. The people we worked with in the city of Rochester, they were super responsive to our permits and our requests for stations. And so we were pretty dense in the city of Rochester, which I think was a great way to start. We're still, again, we're in conversations with them about, exactly what type of vehicle that's going to be, what the ratio will be. So I'll say that, we had a good number in the city, and likely that additional number is going to be, filling in kind of the suburbs and the phase 2 areas.
Somebody just has a follow-up question. Are phase 2 bikes upgraded hopper bikes similar to what's available on the website?
They're probably actually going to be matching to the ones we had this year. Yeah. So okay. The solar powered lock green ones that you saw. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question. Does your data show how many rides combined with using RTS bus racks?
No, we don't have that. I pitched the idea early on, like, hey, what if we had a hopper bike on every RTS bus? So, like a superpower machine. But the response was, well, then the bus driver would have to wait and make sure they can unlock it and all this and that. So, but no, that would be interesting information.
We have a question about data on safety. Any pedestrian, bike, scooter crashes that you're aware of? Any bike, scooter, car crashes? Any other sorts of mishaps that you're aware of?
Let's see. So there was an event where actually a scooter and a car collided, but it was more like, I think the scooter kind of T-boned the car actually, and so they were kind of going after each other for insurance. There were no injuries, which is really great. In one of our first weekends, we had someone fall down on a scooter, and we always follow up with them. We have standard questionnaire, make sure that their insurance is all squared away and everything like that. I think this person checked themselves into a hospital and they were fine. We picked up the scooter, followed up with them. but HOPR's been around since 2011 and has never had actually a major injury, which we're really thankful for. We started with our scooters as a safety measure. We started with a reduced speed. So when people got going in their second and third rides, they could go full speed. But for everyone's first ride, they were limited. I think it was like 5 miles per hour. So again, just to get a handle on it. Yeah.
If I recall correctly, I want to say in 2018 or 2019, the bike share operator that we had previously, they did make a couple bicycles available on the Riverway Trail, tandem bicycles, especially unique bicycles where two pedalers could like recline and sit side by side. Could that be a possibility someday so that, couples could take a ride along the canal?
That's interesting. You know what? I could bring up something like that. You know what? So some of the folks in the company have started. It's kind of a new idea called Veni rides, VENE, Veni rides, and it's all about electric vehicles. And I'm not sure that there is a tandem unit available, but it's worth asking about, looking into.
Cool. Let's see. So we have a question about station placement. How does the funding work for station placement? You mentioned that some of the stations are sponsored. How does that work?
Sure. Right. So this kind of gets into the nitty-gritty about what bike share actually is. So if you go to any city, and for bike share, kind of the standard is there's a certain dollar amount per bike, so say a city, we say, hey, it's going to take X amount of dollars to have this one bike on the street for a calendar year, and that's us putting it there, maintaining it, checking up on it, make sure it's mechanically sound. And so as you multiply that number, the number goes up. And so when ESL Bank approached us, it was some combination of certain number of bikes with the dollar amount. And so the amount they gave sponsored, say, 8 of these equity locations. And so that's generally how it works. And so if any of you out there are looking to be a sponsor, you could even have your own decals on the bike and that kind of thing. But it's essentially sponsoring the station, which gives you your information on the station, as well as your decals on the bike. And so it's a certain dollar amount, essentially.
We have a question here about the reduced fare passes. And they're just wanting to know if the per minute rate can be lower in marginalized communities so that people can get to work.
Let's see. So communities such as, like, say, within the city of Rochester?
Yeah. If they have that reduced pass, is it less per minute? Is the charge less per minute when using it?
Yes, the charge is for the reduced pass, the charge is less. Obviously, it is difficult to say, lower the price for everyone as a whole without, subsidizing that in some way. But yeah, we definitely do work to make it, as approachable as possible. Our pedal bikes are 15 cents a minute, which is pretty good.
This person has a follow-up question to that question, specifically about where the equity stations are located. Would it be possible for those to have a lower per minute rate?
Boy, I like where you're thinking here. This is out of the box thinking. That's great. I like that idea. Just I'm thinking of how that would work. So we're completely app based. So somebody they approach the bicycle, they open the app, scan the QR code of that bike, and then it unlocks. And so it would require the app knowing where the person was and give them a different rate based on where they were. I'm gonna think on this one and see if that's even possible, because there are certain things we can play around with, our little boundaries on our map and things like that.
We have another follow-up question about the types of bikes. Is there any potential for adaptive bicycles, trikes, cargo bikes, Dutch bikes, box bikes?
Yeah, so obviously, so we have to think in kind of larger numbers here, right? And so it is difficult to kind of come up with those kind of niche models. So in general, it tends to be our basic, pedal comfort bikes, e-bikes. If you have a model in mind that you think will work, that 1,000 people are going to love this bike, let me know what that is, and I can plug it further on down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing increasing news around the country of cargo bike share, with people actually being able to get a lot of groceries in a cargo bike. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I could see that being cool, going to the public market or grocery store for sure.
We have a question here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have is it a 3-year contract? And
3 years.
what does the
Yeah.
business model look like for a profitable, year after 3 years? What does profitability look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. So again, we're just, we're here doing what we do, doing bike share the best we can. And so the idea is that once we're here, people see what we do, they know what we're doing. At that point, we're approaching potential sponsors. So that's what a lot of it comes down to. And of course, we'll be looking at the, year over year user revenue and things like that, and kind of looking at what that gap might be and filling it with sponsorships. So, yeah.
All right. I don't see any other open questions in the chat or the Q&A. So if you can always press the raise your hand button and we can unmute you if you have another question. Any other questions before we sign off this evening? This has been great.
Yeah. Well, and Jesse, when you told me about this, about something at the Hungerford building, I was looking forward really to rubbing elbows with all these people and sharing a holiday cookie or something. So I'll aim for that next time. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, so I think that's it. Isaac, thank you so much. Hopper, thank you so much. We're so excited to have a bike share again, and I know I can't wait for April for everything to be redeployed.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse, and thank you all for being here.
Yep, and just a final reminder about our free winter cycling presentation at the Central Library this Saturday. Actually, it's going to be virtual. It's going to be Zoom only, but the link to register for that Zoom is in the chat, and I hope to see some of you there. But thank you, everybody, for joining. This is going to go up on YouTube, so you can watch it later too and pass it along to your friends. Thanks, Isaac.